Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have the absolute truest embodiment of a person of distinction. Her name is Elayne Gilliam. We'll be discussing her fantastic book, Family Skeleton, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And I will say, Elayne was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business, author Reputation Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, move it through ARP. You can find out more information on them at authorreputationpress.com. And guys, listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Elayne here on the line because her book we're discussing today, Family Skeleton. Right off the bat, the moment you hear that title, at least for me, first thing that came to my mind was some of the skeletons in my closet. And some of the skeletons that my family possesses. And listen, I'll be the first to admit it. My family definitely has it. I'm sure yours does as well. Whose family doesn't? Now, I love the fact that we have Elayne here because she's going to be discussing some of the skeletons in her family's closet. And it's a memoir, in a sense, right? It's a memoir that is really meant to be informative, really meant to be helpful. It's meant to help you, as the reader, through tough situations in your life by learning from the wisdom that she has acquired throughout hers. And guys, whether you can relate to the specific circumstances in which Elayne will be discussing throughout this interview, one thing that is certain is we all, on our life's journey, face different challenges and have different moments of adversity that we encounter. And how we choose to look at the situation and how we move past those challenges makes all the difference. And I love the fact that we have Elayne here on the line because, it brings me back to the whole thought of wisdom and wisdom being acquired. And what I love is that a lot of times when we think of wisdom, we think that we have to go through the experience ourselves in order to acquire the wisdom. Well, that's not always the case. Because especially here in this instance, we're going to be able to acquire wisdom through Elayne's experience and how she dealt with some of the tough moments in her life. And remember how you can always try to apply that to yours. And listen, Elayne is the expert, okay? She's written the book. She's pulling from her experience. She's going to be able to articulate all of the nuances in her book much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's bring her here on the line with us. Elayne, first and foremost, thank you so much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction. How are you?
Just fine, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, listen, we're very much looking forward to this, and I know that there are going to be moments in this interview and within your story that are tough to discuss. So we appreciate you for having the bravery to put that into a book and share it with others, but also having the wherewithal of knowing that your story will be beneficial to so many others out there. So Elayne, without further ado, and I know that this book is a memoir, so this first question may end up spilling into the book, and if it does, that's totally fine. But before we go into the book specifically, start by articulating to our listening audience a little bit more about yourself, please.
Well, I found myself at the age of 40, a widow, and caring for 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And I gradually became aware that 2 of them had mental problems. Now, the irony is that my 2 youngest have been wonderful children. I'm proud of them. military families. I couldn't ask for anything more. A teacher and a career military man. But the odd thing is that these first two children had such problems. My daughter, my eldest daughter, committed suicide at the age of 38. And the son has gone on to be an alcoholic, mentally ill. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, a brain disorder. Mm-hmm. Now, I did have some schizophrenia in my mother's side of the family. She had a brother who spent years in an institution, which in that earlier time was typical. Today, those hospitals are all closed. My uncle survived terrible experiences with electric shocks. He eventually was given a medicine that was discovered, and he responded and was free of his problems and spent his life again with his wife until about age 94. But I've had no such good fortune with my son. I wish that he could respond to something. But he is a dual diagnosis, which is schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, and alcoholism. And the alcoholism has been harder to deal with than the schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm. Wow. You know, Elayne, thank you so much for sharing. Again, guys, I stated this when we started. There are so many aspects that are going to be difficult to discuss, but just because the conversation is difficult to have doesn't mean we don't have to have the discussion. Now, Elayne, talk to our listening audience and really express to us, in terms of inspiration, what did you see going on that made you feel compelled to put this book out for the benefit of the public at large?
I believe that it was a healing process. After my daughter committed suicide, and it happened 10 days after I had visited her in Arizona and had a wonderful time. No inclination that she was going to take her life. But I realized that I had to do something. And I was a quilter and I was a crafts person. So a dear friend offered to take me to a scrapbooking club to make a scrapbook, a healing process. And I was delighted. The other participants all had losses. And I just delved into this project, and I got together the photographs and the letters that my daughter had left me. And I made a beautiful book that I still have today. After that time, I decided to write. And, I thought, oh, this is healing. And I called the book My Son, My Daughter. I was inspired by a book that I found at a market book sale. And it was called This Stranger, My Son, A Mother's Story. And I was so moved by it. And I thought, well, I can write that book. I can write about my son. my daughter. And I began to write. And then over time, my children moved me from California, and eventually I ended up on the East Coast. And I still always had this story in my soul. I had to get it off of my chest. So I started writing, and a friend helped me come up with the name of Family Skeletons, a web of mental illness. Well, the news got to a family member. Oh, they were shocked. Oh, please don't put your name on it. My maiden name was Delancey. Oh, please don't do that. I'll be embarrassed. My friends will be upset. I thought, oh, no one cares about my desire, my need to express this calamity. My children's father had just died of ALS. He had been in a nursing home for 9 months. I had ended up on welfare. And this was a whole unexpected life for me. And so I pursued, and the name changed, and I made a quilt with the children, and I put my son, my daughter on the quilt, and I showed it everywhere at shows. But I can only say that it was so helpful to do these things, whether it was quilting or whether it was writing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I found in my daughter's drawers, after she was deceased, that she had all kinds of notes, poems. I didn't know she was a poet, but she had written all these things, and she had a diary. So I utilized those works that she left, and they gave me the background to understand a little of what was going on with her. But it was a terrible shock. My daughter had been through 2 years of college. She was intelligent. She could have done anything she wanted to. She was beautiful. My son, it was a different story. He had learning disabilities. He was behind in school, and I didn't realize he had problems until he came out of 3 years in the Army, and he couldn't get a job. By that time, I had remarried, my third, and my husband encouraged me to go to a psychiatrist and take both of the children. Well, what happened was that my son was diagnosed with disability. He was put on SSI. As far as my daughter, she could do anything she wanted to do if she wanted to do it. I did find that she got into the use of cocaine during her brief life. And this was difficult for me to understand.
Absolutely. Guys, again, here on the line with Elayne Gilliam. We're discussing her fantastic book, Family Skeleton, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Now, Elayne, again, thank you for all of the information that you've relayed so far. And you started to go into it a little bit within the last answer, where you were talking about little hobbies and things that you picked up that you found beneficial. Now, the next place that I wanted to go was into tips. Now, we know, especially after this past year that we have all gone through with this pandemic, there is a lot of people that find themselves in very tough positions. And as I stated when we first started this interview, whether our listening audience can specifically relate to your individual circumstances, and that meaning your 2 children with mental illnesses, there is hope in your words and in your story. And it may not be the easiest silver lining to see, but it's there. Now, I want to give you the opportunity, Elayne, for any of our listening audience members that are out there that find themselves also in a very difficult situation. Maybe they also have children that suffer from mental illness, or they also have children that suffer from addiction, or not even tied to that, they just find themselves going through a difficult time. What words of wisdom, what advice would you be able to give our listening audience?
Well, there are groups out there. I joined a group in Butte County, California, called AMI, Alliance for the Mentally Ill. The national group is NAMI, and they are headquartered in Arlington, Virginia. And I pulled up my bootstraps, in a sense. At one time, I had always wanted to attend a NAMI meeting. So I heard it was going to be in Washington, D.C. So I flew to D.C. I met family members who, at the hotel where I was staying, and I had the opportunity to talk to many other people. The speakers were just wonderful. And it was an experience to know that I am not alone. And then, on the other hand, there were my hobbies. I love music, so I listened to music, and I loved my quilting. Mm-hmm. I had books published prior to this book on my quilting. And I just kept going. I remarried for the 4th time. So I found that there was a life after tragedies. Absolutely. I refuse to let it destroy me. There's too much else there. I have 2 wonderful younger children. So there's so much else. I have a grandson getting married this 4th of July, the 3rd. And there are other things to live for. I couldn't even cry when I was called by the police and told that my daughter had shot herself. And I was all alone that night. I just sort of sank into the floor, and then I was numb as I called friends, my relatives, and people started showing up at my door. But I remember sitting and just totally numb. This can't be happening. But as the days went on, and I had the care of my mentally ill son still, I pulled my bootstraps up, and I wrote a book,
And Elayne, I love what you just said. And guys, listen, what she's talking about is the perception. And no one is saying that it's easy, because I'm sure it isn't.
No.
But what she said is life has so much more to offer. She had to shift
Correct.
her perception to see, even though it was heartbreaking what was going on with 2 of her children, she had 2 others. She couldn't focus all of her time and energy on her 2 other children because she needed to make sure that she was a mother to all 4. She didn't only have 2 children. The hobbies that she got into helped her take her mind off of things, helped her enjoy life. There is so much power in that realization. And that is truly where, in my mind, the power of this book lies. And that is exactly why there's no way around it. Guys, you have to head to her Amazon page. You have to head to her Barnes & Noble page. And you have to pick up your copy of Family Skeleton by Elayne Gilliam. You surely will not be disappointed. What I love so much about this is, A, it's such a heartfelt story. It ended on a positive note. But also, guys, we've barely scratched the surface. There are so many other things within the confines of the book that we could be discussing. Unfortunately, we're out of time. So you know what you have to do. Head on over to her pages, pick up Family Skeleton. Let's learn, let's grow, let's develop, let's listen to the wisdom that she's been able to achieve and acquire over the years. And let's apply that to our lives. Because life has so much to offer. Sometimes we just have to alter our perception to see that. Elayne, this has been an absolute honor. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today at People of Distinction.
And thank you so much.